All right, y'all can get started.
All right, thanks, Carolyn. Let's get Sherry on here.
Hi there.
We hear you, but we don't see you.
Well, I can't figure out how to fix that. So that's just the way it is.
Do you have a button on the top of your screen that's blocking the camera?
I don't know.
That's what happens
Privacy
to me
thing, the
sometimes.
privacy cap.
Yeah. If not, no big deal, Sherry. Richard, glad you made it. Sorry about the tractor guy, but Richard, your mute is on. And Dave's mute is on too. And Randy's.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Well, I heard you, but it looks like it's off. Okay, that looks good. Randy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Dave, you're good?
Yes.
All right, we have Leo, Rich, Richie, Dave, Randall, Karen Firehawk is here, although she's a liaison, not a voting member. Liz Palmer is on. She, of course, is liaison to the Board of Supervisors. Okay, Sherry's still there, so I guess we can go, huh?
Yep.
All right, we ready to get started?
Yeah. Okay. So Carolyn, I need to share the screen now.
No, I'm going to do the preamble.
Yeah, wait till
You-
he does the preamble and the roll call, then you can share your screen.
Okay.
So because of the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being held electronically over the Zoom platform. It is authorized by the county's declaration of local emergency, the county's continuity of government ordinance, and Virginia Code section 2.2-3708.2, subsection A3. The committee members are not physically present at a single central location, as it is unsafe or impractical to do so because of the pandemic and the county's declaration. The committee members are participating electronically. This meeting is being held according to section 6 of the county's continuity of government ordinance. All committee members will identify themselves and state their general physical location during the roll call, which we will hold next. Let me slide down. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone, both as provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. The public is always invited to send questions, comments, and suggestions to the committee through the county's Community Development Office at any time. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. All right. So now for roll call, Sherry Buttrick.
Here, I'm in my office at the forestry building because apparently the power is out in my corner of Whitehall.
All right, Leah Young. Did she join us? Richard Keeling, Mr. Keeling.
I'm here. I'm at 1745 Chopin Drive at my home.
Roger Ray. Mr. Ray. Randall Switz.
Yes, I'm here and I'm at 501 Faulkner Drive in Albemarle County.
Rob Farrell. Mr. Farrell. John Moore. Mr. Moore. Leo Malik.
I'm present and I'm here in Earlysville at 4826 Advanced Mills Road.
And Dave Norford, Mr. Norford.
I'm here at my neighbor's house borrowing their computer because we don't have enough internet to make this work, and I'm in Stony Point.
All right. So Madam Chair, we have 5 present, and that establishes a quorum. And further, Liz Palmer, Supervisor Palmer.
Yes, you want me to do, I'm here, I'm at 2958 Meacham Banks Drive at my home, Charlottesville, 22901.
And Karen Firehook.
I'm here and I'm at my office at 320 Valley Street in Scottsville, Virginia, in the tip of Albemarle.
All right. Okay, we still have a quorum.
Good. Okay, Richie, does that do it? Should I share the
Yep,
screen
nope,
now?
you're good to go.
Okay, I'm gonna share the screen.
Unless Carolyn says otherwise, but I think we're good to go.
We're good to go.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, everyone can see the agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Have people had a chance to read through this? I guess I've sent it out a few times because we had to change the meeting date at least twice. So hopefully there's been adequate time for everyone to read over and kind of understand what we're trying to do and what some of the issues have been. Does that sound right?
Yes, I've read it. In fact, I've been looking at it and following up for the last hour or so.
Right.
And I wanted to, because of our brief email exchange earlier, I just wanted to follow up, and I was trying to look at the county code which you referenced. And you referenced section 10 of chapter 18 zoning and chapter 14 subdivision of land. But it didn't, it's nothing specific. I could not find where you were referring. For example, section 10 only has, section 10 of chapter 18 actually only has 5 sections. So I couldn't find what you were referring to. And, I really wanted to, because I had some, I just wanted to feel like we were doing the right thing in going forward here. I believe that there were legitimate objections that were raised. So anyway, maybe I'm getting ahead of the meeting. You said, could we read it and understand it? And I don't see how you can understand it when you can't get to what the code that we are dealing with is. So maybe Richard Deloria could help us.
So I'm trying to pull up the sections that were referenced. And rather than go directly to those code sections, I'll just indicate what I think Chess is getting at. And that is that in terms of operation of the ACE ordinance, there has to be a determination of development rights, and it has to be done subject to what the county's ordinances, zoning ordinances are, and also their subdivision of land ordinances. And so generally what's done if there's a proposed development is it goes to community development, and they have planners in there. Francis McCall is the primary primary planner that I'm aware of. So what he will do is, subject to those ordinances, he will look at the land and the landscape and the lay of the land, and he will make a determination as to what where dwellings or anything that's required of a site plan, where they can be sited on a particular parcel. And so you can imagine a 100-acre parcel, but if you have certain areas that are on steep slopes, or if they're in floodplains, those areas will be eliminated from the determination. So what essentially the ACE ordinance does is it says that the administrator who is the director of zoning or his designee will need to make a determination of division rights. And that is done by one, subject to those ordinances, but two, after a request is made of the zoning administrator as to how many theoretical division rights are on that. So in terms of what happens, as I understand it from discussions with this committee and also with Francis McCall and Charles Rapp, who is the director of planning for Albemarle County, is essentially when you ask for theoretical division rights, which the program administrator is charged with doing, they essentially do two things. They look at the size of the parcel to determine how many 21-acre parcels can be cut out of that. And each one of those could theoretically be developed. And then determines based on the history, and that's when you go back to 1980 when the zoning maps were established and locked in the number of development rights that existed. They'll go back and look at that and see how many development rights are left on the residue of that division, so to speak. And so they do that without looking at floodplains or mountain protection zones, steep slopes, anything like that. And that's the number that gets reported. The administrator then is obligated to make a determination after receiving that information, and is obligated to do it consistent with the ordinances. And so that's where Chas and community development come up with a determination as to the number of development rights. And based on that, then the scoring happens.
I wonder if the question here might be the same question that I wondered when I looked over the ordinance just now, which was whether Chapter 18 of zoning and Chapter 14 subdivision of land locks us into any particulars about basically defining the individual characteristics of the property's usability. And if that's where some of our issue is coming from with this notion of usable.
So the short answer to that is yes, that could be the source of the debate. But I guess the answer is that staff's responsibility to do that. Evaluation and then to report it out in terms of rankings, and then whatever, the report in terms of descriptions of the property and that sort of thing. So in speaking with Francis McCall, he indicates that's what he does. But he does it from the comfort of his office. So he uses GIS, he uses maps, he uses topographic maps, that sort of thing, to make those determinations. I won't take credit for this, but Sherry has explained to me that it becomes more of an art than a science to some extent, that two learned individuals could take the same information and come up with different calculations after receiving the theoretical division rights. So that's something that under the ACE ordinance is the charge of the administrator of the program. And then my hope would be then that the staff reports in making its recommendations in terms of rankings, that it reports how it was those calculations were made. And then certainly the committee would be in a position to debate them at that point.
Now, I'm still trying to get the general case really clear in my mind. When Mr. Rapp, the head of planning, or is it community development, or both?
He's a planning director.
Okay,
Planning.
planning director.
Yes.
When, what did he say that his office really couldn't put the staff time into? Was it doing what Francis McCall does? In other words, is that no longer an option to us?
So my understanding, is Francis McCall will do the theoretical when you get a candidate list for ACE funding, Chess will ask Francis to do an evaluation as to theoretical division rights. So he will do that, and that's essentially based on the size of the parcel, and then I call it the history, going back to 1980 when development rights were locked into certain parcels. That's what he does, and that gets reported back to Chess. What he does in the course of his planning duties is he does a deeper dive. And I can't tell you how much time or effort that takes, but I'm understanding it takes significantly more time and more effort. He has the ability.
Charles is now in the meeting if you need to ask him any questions.
Charles is in the building.
Charles is in the building.
I don't know, Charles, did you hear the question?
I did.
Then you can take it away.
Sure. So I'll just speak to the challenge of getting to actual development rights. As Mr. Deloria pointed out, we do our best here in the office to utilize overlays and do some basic calculations based on some of the data that we have available. To get into an actual development right determination, you would really need to have a sound understanding of grading, of stormwater management, of all types of design criteria, and really do a detailed site plan. And as was spoken before, as someone who's done many of those throughout my career, you could come up with 10 different versions of the same site plan just to tweak it. And that expense would be significant, and it would be quite laborious. And it really would require, a very experienced surveyor or a civil engineer or a landscape architect. It's really not in the skill set that most planners even have to get to that level of land development planning, other than using some high level analysis to do some overlays to get an approximate kind of best guess. And so that's what the county has always done. We have not gone down that road. We would really need to establish a consultant budget and go through a very detailed process. And then, as was kind of said, it's not a guarantee that we get it exact. And so we really don't get into that very detailed analysis on a regular basis. And Richard Keeling, I would just add that this all does feel very squishy. There's no doubt about it, because it makes direct reference to the zoning laws. But I don't think it was ever the intent in creating the ordinance that we would have to do this deep dive and pay a surveyor to come out and make an exact determination. I think the general notion would be that an administrator or me would understand the basic rules of the zoning and then just apply using the tools I have, come up with the best determination I could, knowing that is inexact. But as Charles says, you could get 10 different people to do it, even people more qualified, much more qualified than I, and they may come up with 10 different answers.
Charles, while you're still here, could I ask, it seems to me that Roger has pointed out something that is useful and important to know potentially, which is that there may be a discrepancy between what we say we're doing and what we're actually doing. I wonder if you could help us to reconcile the language of the ordinance so that we might amend it. And that we might therefore be able to do what is actually doable and not say that we're doing more than we're doing, which I think is Roger's point.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with that effort. I think that would be worthwhile and would help to provide some clarity. And also, you know, guide future applications, whoever might be doing the work, so they have a clear understanding as to what's the appropriate level of detail to go down, you know, and what our goal is.
I mean, I would love to have us know exactly what motion to make to amend the ordinance and make such a motion. But I'm not sure that I exactly know what to say.
I think it's going to take some analysis probably to figure it out. You know.
And if you look at page 2 of the agenda, where I've skipped on down to the corollary discussion, since we are having this discussion about how this determination is made. And actually, Charles, Sherry, Richie, and I all met to talk about this. And we talked about 3 options: changing the ordinance so we only consider theoretical, which would kind of overstate things, lead to higher scores than what we do now. But for the most part, most of the scoring, people are getting the so-called usable is roughly equal to the theoretical, or close enough to it that it's not affecting the score terribly, unless it was a steep tract of mountain land like the Henley property, or you know, a lot of floodplain, things like that. So that would be one: change the language ordinance so we only consider theoretical. The other would we eliminate this criteria altogether, which I call the nuclear option, because I'd rather not go down that road, because actually, you know, eliminating development rights is a huge part of putting a piece of property under easement and protecting. So I think we need to include, you know, always consider that. And then the last option was that we somehow or another clarify or revise the language so it is clear, Sherry, and it gives much clearer instructions about how this determination is made.
I think it would be a good example if you could take the Henley property, for example, and have its theoretical number of division rights, and then what whoever has determined are usable rights, and just compare, just have 2 line items on the scoring sheet, one for theoretical and then one for usable, based on whatever detail you go into, so the committee can see if one parcel is tougher to develop than the other, and just notice that.
Didn't we do theoretical in this particular instance?
Jess, do you want to scroll down so we can see the
Yeah.
card, if we want to discuss that?
Yeah, I'll just look at, I'll go right to the Henley property, since Randy brought that up. And so here it is. It's not the green area, but it's tax parcel 40-12A. I only highlighted the green because that's under easement, and that was the original easement that the Henley brothers put under easement with ACE in 2001. But what it shows, probably should have blown this up more, is it joins a stream that feeds into the Beaver Creek Reservoir. I have the critical layers turned on, so you really don't see any critical slopes to speak of. In my notes, there's 620 feet of road frontage. It's pretty gently rolling farmland that's got 5 theoreticals. So the calculation was that, okay, I messed something up there. Okay, so it's got 5 theoretical development rights. The idea is, with an easement, Mr. Henley would be allowed to build 1 dwelling, which would use up 1 development right. meaning we would eliminate 4. So I gave him 2 points for that. When I showed this property blown up to Francis recently, he immediately looked at it and said, I can't see why you couldn't fit all 5 development rights in there. And I mean, that's someone more experienced than I, who was just making a pretty quick judgment based on all the things he knows. And I kind of did the same thing. If it was a more complicated property, as I've done in the past, I would talk to Bill or Francis and try to get a sense of what are the issues I need to be looking at and considering. So Richard, in this case, I felt like, there are 5 development rights on the Henley property. So I gave him 2 points, which with his donation of 12%, put him at 20 points and made the property eligible. Now let me while we're looking at maps, let's just go ahead and look at the Campbell property. Campbell on the left is joined by the Peter Dutnell easement, which again is an ACE easement. There are 2 other easements to the south and to the east. The property is about less than a mile south of Jimmy Powell's property, which was the very first easement ACE had. So this is an important property. It's got 3,400 feet of road frontage. Again, it has a few critical slopes near some of the secondary streams, but for the most part, it's just rolling, highly developable farmland. I asked Francis about the 2 streams and the stream crossings that you see in pink or lavender, and he said he didn't see an issue with fully developing this property either. So based on that and based on my looking at it, I said, it's got 12 development rights. So that's how I came up with the score, and I felt pretty comfortable doing that for both properties. I don't know if that answers your questions, Richard Keeling, or makes you more comfortable, or.
Chess?
Yeah, Dave.
Hey, is Francis McCall willing to make an official determination of usable division rights? I mean, he'd be the one.
Charles, I'll let you answer that. I don't think they're in a position that they can do that because they're not surveyors.
Yeah, I mean, he would do similar route that Chess just went down. We could do an official determination is one thing. That just is something that comes from the zoning administrator and is actually part of the record. That still is different than theoretical versus actual. Actual is the thing that I'm saying is very difficult to obtain without a detailed survey and base map to start from, identifying wetlands, identifying streams, identifying topography, and getting down to the nuts and bolts of laying out the site.
Well, Charles, how would you describe what sounds like a 2-part process? One was the just looking up to see what on paper are the theoretical development rights, and 2, a quick and dirty look by Francis. In other words, if we're going to amend the ordinance to reflect what we are doing and what we think is good to do, I can't exactly characterize what we would say that we want the ordinance to say.
I think the quick and dirty and using the information available is the theoretical. That is what we do. What Francis described is what the zoning department does, as described by Mr. Delory as well, where we go back to the history of the property, find out the initial what the property was back in the past. We look at the existing characteristics, we look at the overlays, and that's how we arrive at the development rights.
Okay, because it sounds like you're doing a second step here, not just getting the paper theoretical rights, but actually eyeballing the property. And should we be characterizing that eyeballing in some way other than just for the ordinance to say theoretical development rights?
I do not think so. I think it's too, it's not clear exactly, you know, as we discussed, there's a variety of ways to kind of go about that, and it's not a definite science, you know.
I think Liz has something to say.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So when I discussed this with Richie before, trying to understand everything, and then with Francis, it seemed very clear to me that, as I think Charles said this, if you have, or maybe it was Chess, if you have a piece of property that has a lot of critical slopes, it's a mountainside, you really need that additional check that Francis does. And I just got to throw in back to what Sherry said earlier, is change the ordinance just to reflect that we're going to do this quicker look so that we don't accidentally pull one of these very complicated properties in with too many development rights. It seemed very reasonable to me when it was explained what you're already doing, what Francis is already doing. And maybe in many properties, the theoretical and what Francis is doing are similar, but we do from time to time have more complicated properties. So I just want to throw that in and go back to
just
what
find
Sherry
a way to characterize what that two-part process is that isn't usable determination. I would feel very happy about making hoping that we could amend the ordinance, but it sounds as if we're talking about a little something more than just theoretical here.
Why don't we have Francis and Charles just talk about it and come back with some suggestions for a description?
Okay,
I know
that
I have
sounds
a very short email from Francis. I haven't gone back and looked at it, but in a description of what he actually does. Is that a reasonable thing, Charles? Just to have you guys take a quick look and try to characterize what
Sure.
what Francis is doing?
Yep.
I mean, I think there's a valid point that's been made here that we may not be doing what we say we're doing. And I would be very keen for us to state exactly what it is we are doing and think is good.
So Sherry, as we talked about earlier, there is a proposed amended ordinance that includes changes to the definition of division rights. And so I will share that with Charles and with Francis. And I think what I'm hearing is that we're doing more than looking at the size and looking at the history. We're also using the critical overlays that we have at hand in order to make a determination. So what I'll do is what I sent him before didn't have that, but I'll add in application of critical overlays from the county's GIS system.
Yeah, that was my impression here too, is that we're doing more than what I think the proposed ordinance changed to just say theoretical.
Yeah.
Is, but I don't want us to keep on saying, as we're saying now, that we're doing more than we're actually doing. I think Roger's point is very valid in that respect.
Right. And I'm not even using the word theoretical. It's defining what division rights means, and then it's going to identify the process by which staff arrives at those division rights.
Yeah, that sounds good. If you and Charles and Francis can come to something that you like, I at least would be a happy camper.
Well, when we reach that, I'll share it with the committee.
That's great.
I
Yeah,
would
Sherry,
like to
I hear
also-
you. Oh,
I'd
go
like
ahead.
to just remind everybody that just on these two easements, we're talking about spending in excess of $800,000. I think we could make sure that we do our due diligence to make sure that this is done correctly.
Well, Dave, I hear you. The only thing I'd add to that is that I think, whether they're 5 or 3 development rights really affects more the score than it does the appraisal, which is the money you're talking about, because a qualified appraiser is going to look at the land. If they see it's not very developable, that's going to be reflected in the appraised easement value.
No, I understand that, but I think that given the amount of money we're talking about, we just need to make sure it's done correctly.
Yeah, it's a lot of money not to get exactly right. Yep.
If we have those questions, before we, decide to go ahead and accept the Campbell property, for example, I mean, as I said before, Henley is definitely going to pass anyway. Can we continue to spend that money? On the basis that we think it's probably right, but we're going to check and make sure.
Rich, I think we want to, the purpose of today's meeting is to move forward with something for the Board of Supervisors, a recommendation, to have either Campbell and or Henley appraised. And I just got the preliminary appraised values, which you saw in there. It was for Campbell, it was 722,000, which was considerably more than I had estimated, because apparently the fair market value was 50% higher than the county assessment. The Henley property was, pretty close. But the bottom line is, the way I see it is, we want to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for Wednesday's meeting. And Henley is on the fence. And Campbell, even if you said she had 0 development rights, she still is going to be easily eligible. And therefore, I don't see why we wouldn't go ahead and at least recommend that property.
Was that a
feedback
question?
on that?
Sorry, can I ask a quick question? Dave just said 800,000. Our packet just says that it's going to be a little bit over 200,000. We have 75,000 aside approximately. And then we have another 130,000 to spend on that. So maybe I missed something. Is that going to get these Chess?
Well, Liz, in the original packet, if you look at the scorecard I have here, at the bottom of the scorecard,
Okay.
I showed estimated easement value for Campbell of 425 and Henley of 150,000. And those were just my best estimates based on, recent easements. But in the meantime, when you all made the request to get some real numbers that you could consider, I asked Wesley Woods, an appraiser, to come up with a preliminary appraisal. And while this isn't exact, it's going to be really close. And Sherry knows all about preliminary appraisals. And that is where he came up with 722,000 for the Campbell property. And
that's the easement value, not the land
the
value.
easement value. The easement.
What was the land value?
1.805.
Okay, so in half, the state pays for half and we pay for the other half. So.
Well, no, the 722 would be, and Liz, this is only if the board said, okay, we're going to buy Campbell. If the board agreed to put 722, put funds together to enable us to acquire Campbell, it would be 722 minus the 130 we have in our account. So it would end up being effectively almost 600,000 that the board would have to come up with. The one thing I'll add about this is, historically, when there's been a limited amount of funding in ACE, we offer the applicant what we have. And if you all decided, for instance, that $500,000 was all you could afford, then that's all that would be available to the Campbell property. So even though the appraisal comes in at 722, it doesn't mean you have to come up with that full amount. Does that make any sense?
Liz, what do you think the tea leaves are on the board's inclination?
I honestly don't know. That's a big jump from what we have in our board packet for Wednesday. So that's a little scary. Do you ever get more than one appraisal, since the appraisal is so different than what the county has as an assessment?
We've never been down that road before. It gets costly and it's very time consuming, and who knows, the second appraiser could come out with even a higher value. And Wesley Wood is an excellent easement appraiser. He knows a lot about easements.
Okay.
And I do know
I'm-
Wesley, and I see a lot of his appraisals, and they don't tend to be inordinately high. I will say that much.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's going to be a difficult one. The other thing I would want to know is, historically, would this be an unusually expensive easement as to what we've done in the past for ACE?
We've had more expensive easements, but out of, say, 50 easements, this would be in the top 10% of cost for sure.
But
Okay.
it may also be one of the bigger easements that we've
It's
done.
one of the bigger ones. It's highly developable with all that road frontage, and it's across, it's near development areas, and land prices have shot up here in the last year.
Yeah. Okay.
Jess,
Yeah,
is it possible that since a good deal of this funding comes from the state, that someone might be able to go back to the state and ask for supplementary funds to fill out any shortfall? I mean, going to the Department of Agriculture or to whoever else in state government is the funding source for this at some time in the future?
well, we can't go back to VDAX because they've already given us funding. And that's where the 130,000 we have is. And I actually called Jen Perkins, who Sherry knows well. And Jen said there are no additional funds out there beyond what we've already been approved for. Now, there is the VLCF program, a state program, pretty competitive program. And it's normally matching funds where if they made a grant to us, it would pay for 50% of the cost. But that's no guarantee. And Sherry knows a lot about VLCF also.
Sherry, what's the feeling on that?
There's a timing problem for one thing. They've just finished a grant round.
Of course.
They're just getting ready to announce the awards, but they've already done the staff recommendations. They're already out. Everybody knows basically how it's teed up. So it won't happen again for at least 6 months, maybe a year. I think this would perhaps be a good application if the timing were different, and that's something to think about in the future. VOF also has a program called Preservation Trust Fund, but at the moment, I don't think they're doing any farm easements that are not public access. But Jess, you could check in with, somebody at VOF who's part of the elephant this is, as opposed to me.
Okay, who would you suggest I talk to?
Well, they're having a board meeting tomorrow, so they're probably all hopeless. But Leslie Grayson, maybe Emily White.
Okay, well, I know Emily well.
I believe that the board position at the moment is they're not doing purchase of farm easements, but they do, have some deference to localities, so they would at least talk to you.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. But Leo, it's a good question, and we've always looked at grant funds, but there is always a timing issue, and it seems like a lot of the grant funds have not been as flush with cash recently as they were at one time. I mean, it's certainly worth considering. One question I have for Ms. Palmer is, in your packet, where did y'all come up with the numbers? Like the 200,000 some, I don't know that number.
I have to unmute myself. I'm sorry. I just was reading straight out of the board packet and not incredibly carefully, but I was just adding up the numbers and it just, I can't tell you where they got them. It says the presenter is Chess. And it goes through the available funds. County currently has 75,000 in the applicant pool, Virginia Department of Agriculture, Consumer, blah, 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 blah. It just gives the amount with approximately 130 available to apply to purchase prices. There may be sufficient funds to acquire the Henley easement. So anyway, it's just, I don't know. I can't answer you. I assume it all came from you.
Well, the 130,000 is correct. That was recently updated. I thought it was 58. Then we heard it was 75, and Tia and Anna Kilmer got together and agreed that there's 138 from VDAX in there right now, and that's all we have to use on easements.
Well, I suspect that the board would be willing to put more cash toward it. It's just when you're talking $700 and something thousand, that's a big jump.
It is a big jump, but I just caution you not to get stuck on that number. And hopefully y'all will be able to, do the best you can and come up with an amount that's, close enough that it's worth considering for Mrs. Campbell. And I think she did say, when I threw out an estimate of 425, she said that would be good. She wasn't overwhelmed by the number, but she thought it sounded pretty good.
Well, we'll see how the conversation goes, but certainly if it looks like it's going south, I will jump in and say we can offer her less than the appraised value and see what happens.
No, that would
what
be,
about the income grid? Is she 100% on the income grid? You're not
yeah,
saving
she's
any
going to be
money there?
100%. Yeah.
Okay, rats, okay. Well, I would think perhaps that, Ms. Palmer, if the board could allocate what they feel they could allocate, that then Chess could either offer that, or if she wants to wait a year, try to get a match through VLCF.
Okay.
I think that's right.
So may I ask a question here? The value of the easement is implied that 40% of the value of the land goes to the easement. And that, to me, that seems a little bit high. I mean, how did the appraiser estimate 722,000 out of the 1.8 million to the easement?
Well, Randy, that comes from really looking at comparable, easement sales before and after values, and basically 40% is we've seen higher, we've seen lower. Kind of a good range is probably 35 to 40%. And considering how developable that farm is with all that road frontage, 15 minutes from Charlottesville, I guess I'm not surprised it's 40% of value.
So you're looking at one lot having a value before discounting for anything at $225,000.
Yeah,
What
I know.
about the-
And would that be before sellout and how many years it takes to sell out and all the carrying costs? That's a little high in my opinion.
Jess, has this been to the appraisal review committee?
No, because it's only a preliminary appraisal. And usually when Wesley does a quick preliminary appraisal, he doesn't produce the full report, but he looks at comparables, looks at sales, and it's likely the final number will vary some from that. He actually thought the Henley property would probably go up simply because there's some pending sales he couldn't include. But I'm feeling like we need to, if anything, the committee needs to make some sort of recommendation tonight for the Board of Supervisors to consider. And it could be simply that, I don't know, what we go forward with appraising the Campbell property, and it sounds like we're just gonna forget the Henley property, but go ahead and ask to have the Campbell property appraised and hopefully funded, however that motion is made.
Yeah, I think we all agree that it's a project that we'd love to see done. It's worth doing. And so if we could recommend that it be done so that the board could figure out whether it can afford to do it. They can't do it if we don't recommend that they should do it.
Exactly. Anyone up for a motion?
I would suggest that we vote on the two parties separately.
Okay, good idea, Rich.
I think the motion would be pretty straightforward. It would be a motion to recommend that the Board of Supervisors purchase Campbell, and then the second motion would be the same thing, to recommend that the Board of Supervisors pursue purchasing Henley. And I would say pursue purchasing.
And have appraised.
Well, I mean, that's the recommendation.
It implies that, yeah.
Well, no, then the process for the Board of Supervisors, if they like it, if they think it looks good, then they send it off to be appraised. And then
Okay.
the appraisal gets reviewed by the Appraisal Review Committee. They can look at it. And I think this goes to Mr. Malik's suggestion. They could look at it and say, this is a bunch of junk. And the Appraisal Review Committee could recommend that the appraisal not be accepted and the board not purchase the property, offer to purchase the property.
Okay.
So there's a lot of, there are a lot of safety valves, I think, but you all may think differently.
So Richard, in a situation like this, being a newbie on the board, is it better to make this motion fairly, don't want to use the word vague, but I want it to be kind of unspecific rather than noting some of the concerns that the committee has expressed in their discussion that would prompt the Board of Supervisors to look at this in a slightly different way as they direct the appraisal?
I think that's appropriate. I don't think it has to be one way or the other. I think it is appropriate. At the end of the day, it's a recommendation that's going to the Board of Supervisors. And so then they review it and they have the final say.
I would recommend and move that we defer going forward on the Henley property.
Oh, there's Chess. So motion's been made. Is there a second? Motion is to defer consideration of the Henley property.
I guess if we could move to discussion or maybe even clarification. I'm a little confused, Rich, by your motion, because I was thinking that in a perfect world, maybe we might like to move Henley forward, but that we might make a motion that would recommend that Campbell go forward and then recognize that the limitation in funding that we understand from particularly our supervisor representative, and not make the recommendation at this time for Henley.
Well, I actually concur with what you said. I think that, going forward with Campbell, which is what my intent was to follow up, but to hold off on Henley.
I mean, I would be glad to second. I feel like the chairman shouldn't make a motion as well, and I don't know if the chairman can second a motion, but I would be glad if you could amend your motion to say that we recommend that Campbell be put forward, and then acknowledging a limitation in funding, we would defer Henley for the time being.
I'm glad to do that. The problem is in discussion, do we really, if Campbell gets rejected because we don't have enough money, do we really want to spend that money on the Henley property? And therefore, we would not have that money carrying forward with the hope of getting that property in the future. I don't want to get too.
I see your point. I see your point. Well, maybe a motion could be crafted in such a way as to say, we recommend going forward with whatever funding is available for Campbell. And as it scores higher, we think that that funding and all effort should be made to secure that property, even if it has to be a bargain offering. If it's completely rejected out of hand, then I suppose we can come back and have a noodle on whether or not Henley is a project we want to do.
Yeah, because Rich, right now, we actually have the funds in our account that we could buy an easement on Henley.
I understand that. That's why I was addressing that issue.
Yeah.
Instead of, and I didn't say reject, I said deferred
Right.
for now, thinking that we would go forward with Campbell. And, you know, and then we can always come back, since all we've done is deferred on it.
No, I get that. Well, Richie, can Sherry make a motion as chairman or not?
Or I'm happy to work with the motion that's on the table to try to blend in both those ideas.
Okay, let me do this.
I mean, is there a second to his motion, or is he with, Mr. Keeling, are you withdrawing your motion or still waiting on a second? And the motion is to defer Henley.
Well, I mean, I'll leave that and then come back with another motion if that you don't want that.
And I think the chair can second the motion.
I was slightly reluctant to second that particular motion, and I was hoping to amend or substitute the motion.
I'll second that motion.
So discussion now.
We kind of had discussion on it.
We have.
All those in favor?
Now, the motion that we're voting on is just simply to defer Henley, is that correct?
That's what I understand it to be.
Somebody want to read the motion?
I've got to rely on Mr. Keeling. I understood it to be a motion to defer consideration of the Henley application.
Yeah, to defer consideration of the Henley easement for now. And I understood it was seconded.
Just a second.
Well, it looks like Randy waved anyway.
Yes, I seconded that motion.
Okay, all right. All right, any further discussion?
What did you ask for, Sherry?
I'm asking if there's any further discussion before we vote on the motion. Sounds like no further discussion. Does somebody want to call the roll?
I do. I'm looking for the roll now. Here we go. All right. Sherry Buttrick, Mr. Keeling,
Yes, aye.
Mr. Swits,
Yes,
Mr. Malik,
Yes.
and Mr. Norford.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes.
I would move to go forward with the Campbell easement and recommend that we do the best we can to purchase it and carry that forward to the Board of Supervisors tomorrow.
Second. Any discussion? Somebody call the roll?
Sherry Buttrick,
Can I?
Oh.
Just one question, Sherry. This is a bare bones motion. Would it be in the best interest of moving this forward to, in one way or another, include a recommendation that the available funds be combined in such a way to allow a maximum offer at this particular point that might not actually meet the complete funding needs of the that the committee is looking at?
Believe that may be already implicit in the procedures that Chess would use.
Okay, then, so you don't have to mention that it should be done in consultation with Chess or with you or with anyone else. It's just the fact that they'll be essentially staying with the ordinance and using the ordinance as their guidelines.
Well, Chess or Richie, maybe you could speak to whether it's clear that the board could allocate a lesser amount and an offer could be made.
so what happens, the process is that Chess will appear before the Board of Supervisors, and he will report out what this committee has done. I suspect there'll be other details that he will discuss and the board may have questions about. If the Board of Supervisors agrees that they want to pursue purchase of this property, they do have options, but historically they have sent it out for appraisal, and that certainly is due diligence and the best practice. And so then it will be appraised, and that appraisal will be subject to the Appraisal Review Committee. All that will be reported back out to the Board of Supervisors, at which point they will decide as to what offer they would accept from the landowner. It doesn't have to be what the appraisal says. It could be a lesser amount. It could be amount higher than the funds that we have available at this point in time, if the Board of Supervisors is willing to appropriate funds from another source. So the long answer to Mr. Malik's question is that yes, the board could suggest an offer, a purchase offer that's lower than the appraisal amount.
Fine, thank you for that clarification.
Yes, sir.
May I ask a question, Chess? Are you going to give this higher appraised value when you talk to the board? Or are you going to give both appraisals, your original and this new one?
Well, I'll leave that up to you whether you think I should, but I do feel like I should bring up to the board that the original number of 425 was just based on my best guess, best estimate, and that the 722 is based on a preliminary appraisal done by a qualified appraiser.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I was just kind of wondering how you were going to phrase it, and also with the county assessment is.
Yeah,
Which-
and I can provide those numbers. So I think for you all, it really is a matter of kind of hearing the numbers and then just deciding among yourselves what, is what kind of number works for you.
Yep, okay. I think it's important to hear the appraised value by the county too. So,
I thought the executive summary indicated that preliminary appraisal or preliminary assessment or appraisal was, had been
That's
sought.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
it wasn't included in the executive summary because we hadn't received that yet or in time.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, it's in I haven't read the whole packet yet. I apologize. The executive summary doesn't have the number in it, but you said the property appraisal, the additional attachment A, Richie has all these numbers?
No, I was saying that the Wesley Woods figure, his appraisal, his preliminary appraisal, that had not been
Okay, yeah,
published in time to be included in the executive summary. And so my
Okay.
recollection, I'm not seeing it right here, but my recollection was that was noted in the summary that Chess had requested the preliminary appraisals.
okay. I just pulled up the numbers in the packet just now and, it's the 425, so.
I haven't seen that, so I can't speak to that.
Okay, but what, Liz, what Richie says is correct. That we anticipated getting a preliminary appraisal done. And I literally just got that number this afternoon or late around lunchtime.
Okay. Thank you.
Is in furthering that discussion or your answer, are you saying that the county appraisal is included in that package or that is not a factor?
Well, in the package I provided, it only shows it in the scorecard, the spreadsheet where it shows estimated easement value. And I estimated that using the county assessment at the time. So that's where that number, that 425 came from.
And you used 40%, is that correct, Jess?
Well, I wasn't using any kind of percent at that. I was actually the 425 Campbell, the assessed value is 1.2. So 425 is more like 35%. But that was just my best guess. It's not official.
Is there any more discussion?
Well, Mrs. Palmer would be able to bring up that fair market value is based upon the appraisal, right?
If Jess doesn't, I will.
Yeah, and I can certainly. I'm happy to talk about the various numbers and where they come from.
I just think the board would be interested to know what the county assesses the property at, and then tell them this new preliminary appraisal. I think those two different numbers are important, and show how you came up with something considerably lower.
Right. No, fair enough.
I think just one last thing. Mrs. Palmer sent out an email a week or so ago after that conservation easement expose about the inequities in land conservation. When we get to a property at 1.8 million, that's certainly, at least that raises some questions.
Yes, it does, Richard.
I didn't have any more. I believe Ms. Palmer is going to speak.
I didn't have anything to add to that. I agree, except for, I think Jess said that, that as far as on the income scale, the Campbell property scores very well, right? I mean, that. I
Yeah,
think-
she fits the description of land rich, money poor person, like a lot of properties and a lot of our ACE properties. So, and Richard, that would be kind of my reply to it. ACE is different in that we apply an income grid to, so we are looking, we reward people who have less income. The fact of the matter is, apparently there are 5 people of color, 5 families of color that are farm owners in Albemarle County. So, it's just unfortunate that that's the way it is, but that's kind of the land ownership pattern in this county.
Jess, do you plan on saying a sentence or two to the board about the income grid
Yeah, and I can certainly do that, Liz. And if you feel like you need to prompt me in case I'm forgetting, please do.
Okay. I know
Yeah, I
Scott
think
Clark
actually-
Scott Clark is supposed to give us a overview of easement programs in the county. So I can't remember who comes first, you
I
or
come
him.
after him.
Oh, okay. So he might actually be going to do that.
And we've actually discussed that already. So we're,
Okay,
anticipating there may be questions.
gotcha.
Is there any additional discussion?
So
If
Madam
not,
Chair,
would-
the motion I have on the table and this subject to correction, the motion is to move forward with the Campbell property and recommend to the Board of Supervisors that it pursue purchase of Campbell property.
Would somebody call the roll?
Let's see, Sherry Buttrick,
Aye.
Richard Keeling,
Aye.
Randall Switz,
Yes,
Leo Malik,
Aye.
Dave Norford.
No,
All
And
right, 4
Richard?
ayes and 1. Oh, yes.
Richie, I'm also here. Leah Young, I came in late and I was going to abstain from the last one, the last vote anyway, so I didn't say anything because I had missed some of the earlier discussion, but I've certainly got enough gist of it now, and I would be in favor of moving the Campbell property forward because I know it's been in the process for a long time. It's probably got to be disappointing for the Campbells.
So Lee, I'm
Thanks,
sorry,
Leah.
I didn't see you come in.
That's okay.
Do you know what time you came in? About?
5:30.
And I'm recording you as a yes vote on the Campbell motion.
Yes, thank you.
So Madam Chair, it's 5 yes votes, 1 no vote, so the motion carries.
Very good, thank you. Jess, further business?
I think that really, Sherry, pretty much does it.
Okay, very good. Motion to adjourn in that case. Set the
Sounds good
next
to me.
meeting date.
No second is needed. We can do a voice vote.
You
All
want
in
to let us know
favor?
when the next meeting date is? Is that what's on there?
Yeah.
Yes, I do have that on there, which would be typically the second Monday of each month. Which
Okay.
would be, hold on, I'm trying to, oh, damn it.
That would be October 11th.
Okay, October 11th.
That's what I have.
Okay, very good. Do send us a calendar invitation if you would.
Okay,
Okay, motion to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good night, y'all.
No.
All right.
thanks, everyone.